till the end of the session.
Okay, you can start now.
Thank you, sir. A very good evening to everyone, and I welcome you all to the 96th online knowledge sharing session of OHR, which is scheduled today, that is the 29th of January 2022, Saturday at 7:30 p.m. on Everything About POSH. We have with us speakers Dr. Deeplaxmi, Peshwe, psychological counselor, educator, life coach, and Dr. Shradha Purandari, faculty at DY Patil Business School Corporate Trainer. Before we further continue with the session, there's a request for everyone to please be on mute. And if you have any questions or any doubts, you can either keep them in the chat box or please wait till the end of the session. Thank you. As we all know, OHR is primarily an informal self help group of and for the HR professionals, including those in IR and allied professionals, as well as researchers who have the passion to do better all the time. Indian industry has the capability and potential to make a huge contribution in building better India. OHR believes that now HR professionals make a huge need to be ready to help industry achieve this goal. OHR, that is, only HR, was started 8 years ago as a self help group, wherein a few sensitive and enthusiastic HR professionals experienced a need to help themselves and others in their professional community so as to give better results in the respective organization as well as rise to be a preferred partner of community of HR professionals who desire to make an effective and efficient contribution towards building a better organization. Currently, HR connects to thousands of HR professionals working across various types of industries. And every month, a session is arranged for sharing knowledge and experiences in the industry. We have so far more than 95 such sessions. This is the 96th, and a century is definitely just around the corner. And various training programs for corporates, as well as open house that can be either offline or online training programs. It is overwhelming to see that we have been able to positively influence thousands of HR professionals, and we are now not only becoming a trust, but trusted name in thousands in HR fraternity. We invite you to become a part of this knowledge sharing session or journey through one of the following ways. One, the details are also being shared by Dapi sir in the chat, but let me just read out for you. One, by becoming a member in any one of the WhatsApp group of OHR. Two, by paying necessary annual charges for becoming knowledge sharing member of OHR. Those interested can please ping sir on WhatsApp your name, your designation, and company name for further process. So this was a brief introduction to OHR. Now I would like to introduce our speakers. Dr. Deeplaxmi. Dr. Deeplaxmi is a psychological counselor, educator, life coach, dental healthcare management. She has a total of 23 years of experience and has completed her Bachelor of Dental Surgery from Government Dental College and Hospital, Mumbai in 1992. PGDPC in the Psychological Counseling from Institute for Psychotherapy and Management Sciences, Mumbai 2006. Certification for Prevention of Sexual Harassment of Women at Workplace from Tata Institute of Social Science, Pune 2017. And many more certifications. He has also attended multiple workshops on prevention of sexual harassment of women at workplace, case laws in POSH by Help HR, how to handle complaints of POSH, tricky cases in POSH, and so on. She has also presented Orientation of POSH Act 2013 for 250 level 4 employees of SciBH and also for NABH coordinator course by Asthapna Training and Consultancy Services Private Limited. Capacity building for IC members of SIBH, orientation of POSH Act, and IC functioning for members of HR. She has work experience of total of 23 years. Wow, that is a really lot of life given to the career. That is 3 years experience as presenting officer of internal committee, conducted regular trainings for doctors, housekeeping, nursing, and administrative staff about awareness of POSH Act, creating effective awareness programs and monitoring Prevention and Prohibition Act for 400 plus employees during tenure as proceeding officer, creating safe workplace code of conduct for women employees of Rao Nursing Home, held regular meetings for IC members with updates in the field, redressal conducted for complaints received to IC, and training for all in charges about prevention and prohibition updates on 4th March 2020 in Rao Nursing Home. There are many more points which I could not mention, but let me sum it up. I would like to present our speaker, Dr. Deeplaxmi, to everyone. Now,
thank you, Sukirti. But Shraddha Purandari will be starting the presentation first.
yes, ma'am, I was about to introduce
Okay.
ma'am and
Sorry.
then.
Sorry. Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am. And as for our next speaker, Dr. Shradha Purandari, she is a faculty at Dr. D.Y. Patil Business School, PhD in HR Management, LLM, Masters of Laws. Dr. Shraddha has over a decade of experience in academics, corporate training, and consulting activities. She brings insightful hands on expertise in areas of business strategy, HR, and organizational development to implement pragmatic and high impact solutions to business challenges. She is impaneled as an external expert on IC of many organizations and conducted this training for more than 70 organizations across sectors and various management institutes. Her forte lies in corporate training, labor law orientation training, POSH orientation training, POSH capacity building workshops and audits, HR policy manual drafting, HR consultancy in PMS. So, with a big round of applause, I would like to introduce Dr. Shraddha Purandari. But, ma'am, please, I missed something. Recently, we had conducted our 8th anniversary. Yes, HR had conducted its 8th anniversary offline. And you know who the guest was? He is a famous actor from Booklet. Any idea, anyone? Amrut Deshmukh. Amrut Deshmukh was the chief guest, and if you had already been a member of OHR, you would have the opportunity to meet him recently for the 8th anniversary. So, with this news, I would like to hand over the mic to Shraddha, ma'am, please.
Thank you, Sukriti, for such a warm welcome. Peshwe ma'am, I request you to share the screen. Participants, good evening. I'm very sorry. Today I'm having an issue of power cut at my place, and that's reason I won't be able to actually start my video. If it restores, definitely I would like to start my video, but as of now, I have just joined from my mobile. Okay. So we are here gathered on this training of awareness training on prevention of sexual harassment of women. So within a 1 hour's time, we will just touch upon the main things which are there and about the applicability and all those things. Ma'am, please go to the next slide. So this is what is the agenda which we plan for today. Understanding what amounts to sexual harassment, knowing the history of POSH, then understanding the extended workplace considering the COVID-19 scenario, and of course, understanding the overall redressal mechanism. So when we, ma'am, please next. So when we talk about the POSH, POSH Act is basically comes from a lot of thought process, and equality of status and opportunities have been secured to all the citizens of India. And when we talk about section Article 14 of the Constitution, it says that every person is equal in front of the law. And from that point of view, when we talk about the workplace, then safe workplace is every woman's legal right. So it's a legal right. Okay. And now moving forward to the next, when we talk about the provisions of the constitutions, these are the various things, the various articles of constitution which were taken into consideration while drafting this particular act. And when we talk about sexual harassment, it actually results in violation of the fundamental rights of women. So when we talk about these fundamental rights, Article 14, which is about equality, Article 15, which talks about right to live your life free from any kind of discrimination. So even if the discrimination is based on your sex, based on your gender, then that is also will be termed as a violation of the Article 15, a violation of the Constitution. So this was also taken into consideration while drafting this particular act. Then Article 19, which talks about right to practice any profession, and Article 21, which talks about right to protection of life. So when we handle the cases, at times we face certain issues wherein complainant says that okay, she is having threat to her life because she has filed a complaint and so on. So this article again guarantees that right of protection of your life. So these things were taken into consideration, and accordingly this act was drafted. Now when we talk about seda is basically a kind of a treaty which talks about the Convention of Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, which was passed by UN General Assembly in 1979. And if you have seen on the first slide, we mentioned that the act came into existence in 2013. So we took so many years to stop the discrimination against the women, and ultimately in the year 2013, finally we came up with this act. Now, moving forward to next, I'll quickly tell you the history behind this particular act. Ma'am, move on to next. So, when we talk about the basis of POSH, the basis of POSH is this Vishakha guidelines, or this particular famous case of Vishakha and others versus state of Rajasthan. Now, what had happened in this case? This case is also famously known as the case of Bhavri Devi. So this was a case wherein Bhavri Devi was appointed as a Sakhi by the state of Rajasthan, and her main role was to prevent, to stop the child marriages. So one day, when, and of course, she used to visit various villages in the vicinity. One of the duties of hers were to create the awareness about child marriages, their consequences, and of course, ultimately to prevent those, to stop those child marriages. So when she was moving from these villages to villages, she came to know that one of the villages in that village, the mukhya of the village was planning to marry his daughter, and daughter's age was just 9 months. So somehow this lady, she gathered all those agents, those sakhis who were working for the same cause, and they went to Mukhia's place, and somehow they managed to stop that particular marriage. Now Mukhia, being the head of that village, he of course he got offended that how come a small lady like Bauri dares to stop the marriage of his daughter. And that's the reason, out of that rage, they went to Bauri's place, and when she was working in a farm, they dragged her, and ultimately Mukhia, along with his friends, they gang raped her. And then basically from there, this case actually started. I will not be getting into all the details of this case, but finally this case went into the Supreme Court, wherein this Vishakha, which was an NGO which was working for the rights of women, they filed a petition in the Supreme Court, and their main contention, which they mentioned, was that Bauri became a victim of this entire scenario because she was working for the state of Rajasthan. She was just performing her duties. So onus of this particular thing also falls on state of Rajasthan. And then, of course, when in that case, Supreme Court accepted this fact, and they finally came up with this Vishaka guidelines. So when this was again a kind of a landmark judgment. So in Vishakha guidelines, they mentioned that the first time ever in the history, they mention what amounts to sexual harassment. They define the sexual harassment. Then they also noted one thing, that they shifted the accountability from individuals to institutions. So they mentioned now the state of Rajasthan being an organization who appointed this Bhavri Devi, they are also responsible, and the onus lies on them as well. Then in the guidelines, they mentioned that there is a need to prevent this act. So priority was set, and prevention was prioritized. And finally, they also mention that there is a need to come up with the innovative redressal mechanism. Now, why innovative redressal mechanism? It doesn't mean that we'll be bringing any innovations in that. But when we talk about country like India, wherein we need to fight for justice, and we always say that justice delayed is justice denied. And in that situation, there is a need to come up with the mechanism which will actually offer you, which will give you the speedy kind of a redressal, speedy justice. So these were the guidelines set by the Supreme Court, and of course they mentioned that all the organizations should follow that. But these were just the guidelines, these were not the act, and many organizations tend to ignore that. Ma'am, please next. So when we talk about, ma'am, go to next. Yeah. So when we talk about this act talks about these three things. The act revolves around these three things: protection, prohibition, prevention, and finally the redressal. The redressal in the format of a speedy inquiry proceedings. Moving further, now let's understand the applicability of this act. So this act is applicable to all the organization. Of course, it extends to whole of India, now including Jammu and Kashmir, and it is applicable to all the organizations, establishments, companies, wherein 10 or more employees are working. So obviously a question comes that if I'm a startup who is a small organization, if there are 5 or 6 employees are there, whether act is applicable or not, then of course the answer is the act is applicable. Only thing is, in terms of filing a complaint, as being there are less than 10 members, the company or that startup will not be having their own the internal complaints committee. So they will have to go to the local complaints committee, and whoever is the complainant needs to file her case over there. That's it. But act is applicable to all the organizations. Next. So section 2O of the act defines workplaces. So be it a government organization, hospital, a nursing home, even corporations, companies, educational institutions, farms, say sports facilities, if you're providing, even a cooperative societies, service providers, NGOs, for everything will be termed as a workplace, and to all of them this act is applicable. You could see on the slide I have highlighted this house as a part. The reason being is, at times at our place maids are coming. So for that maid, your house will be termed as a workplace. And if in case if that maid becomes a victim of this sexual harassment, then she also has a right to file a complaint, because your house is a workplace for her. Ma'am, next. Okay. Now this is something which COVID-19 has imposed on us, and as due to COVID pandemic, we started working from our homes, and that's the reason our home has also can be termed as an extended workplace, because nowadays we are working from home, and everything is done from the home. We are contributing to the organization, so that home is the extended workplace. Ma'am, move to next. So related to this extended workplace, there was this famous case law. This came into existence before the act came into existence. The decision was given by the Supreme Court of India in the year 2008 itself. So this was a landmark case of Saurav Kumar Malik versus Controller and Auditor General of India. And therein in the judgment, court has observed this thing. This was a part of the judgment, that if a person can interact or do any business conference with another person while sitting in some other country, or by way of say video conferencing, and if something goes wrong with that person's say colleague, could be a secretary or could be a female colleague, then at that time that person cannot just shrug off his responsibilities, and he cannot say that, okay, I hadn't committed anything because I was sitting at my residence and I was just doing that. He cannot say that, because your home is also extended workplace. So related to this, Supreme Court has also come up with certain observations, and they mention that what is that proximity from the place of work. So not in terms of say in terms of distance or kilometer, but what is that proximity of the place of where you are working related to your work, that needs to be taken into consideration. Then control of the management over such place or residence where the working woman is residing. So if my boss has given me certain tasks, then definitely he would be expecting me to complete that task, even though I'm doing it from my home. So yes, there is a control of that management over my place or residence related to that work. So that has also been taken into consideration. And finally, it was also observed that such residence has to be an extension or contiguous part of your working place. And considering all these things, it was decided that if you are a part of such kind of a scenarios, then your home will also be termed as a extended workplace. Next. Now, for the understanding of everyone, I have just splitted this section 2A, which talks about aggrieved women. So under aggrieved women, these are the three categories we can talk about: a working woman, a visitor, and finally a student. So when we talk about against students, apart from POSH Act, UGC has also come up with specific guidelines, which talks about, especially related to the constitution of IC, the student representatives and all. So that part is there. We will focus on mainly on the working women. So who falls under the category of working women, who may be termed as a working woman. So the way I already mentioned, if at a household, domestic homes, if a maid is coming, then that home will be termed as a workplace for that maid. Then under working women, this category also comes if there are any employees who are working as a on a regular basis or temporary, ad hoc, or even if they are the daily wager, even if they are working for the hourly basis, still they will fall under the category of working women. Then these working women or these aggrieved women, she might be working for the sake of remuneration, or it could be on a voluntary basis, because earlier I have told you that this act is applicable to NGOs as well. So even if they are not getting any remuneration, and if it is on a voluntary basis, but still they will be termed as a aggrieved women if anything goes wrong with them. Then this employment could be a direct employment, or it could be through the contractors or the agents. Then still that women will be having the right to file a case. And finally, irrespective of what is the nature of your employment, be it a contract, be it on probation, even if you are a trainee, intern, apprentice, whatever it is, the lady will be termed as a working woman. Ma'am, next. Now it is essential for all of us to understand the basics. When we talk about the sexual harassment cases, many a times it happens that actually the case doesn't fall under the category of sexual harassment. It could be a gender discrimination, or it could be a gender stereotyping, or it could be a simple harassment. Not necessarily it is falling under the category of, say, sexual harassment. So it is very essential to first of all filter this case and accordingly decide whether it falls under sexual harassment or not. Just to give you an example, when we talk about when if I say a nurse, definitely all of us will start thinking about a female nurse. We may not think about a male nurse. Or if I say a mason, then probably we will start thinking about a man who is working on a construction site. We may not think about a woman, because that is what how our mindsets are. That is how the from society, the patriarchal society from where we belong to, and we are stereotyping the professions along with the genders. So if anything goes in that context, then definitely it will not be termed as a sexual harassment. It will be termed as a kind of a gender stereotyping. Or in case of a harassment, if everybody is working on the same rank, if they are a part of the same team, but somebody's targets are different as against others, it means that it is a kind of a harassment. Probably, of course, it is not related with the sexual tones and all, but it can be simply termed as a harassment in that case. So this is how, whenever the complaint comes, it is essential to first of all use these filters and to decide whether it falls under a gender discrimination, or whether it is gender stereotyping and harassment. And then accordingly, IC is supposed to entertain that particular complaint. Next. Ma'am, go to next. Okay. Ma'am, go to next. So now it is essential for all of us to understand what amounts or what qualifies. Ma'am, go to the earlier slide, please. What amounts to sexual harassment. So this sexual harassment has already been defined in the act, and it has been mentioned that any unwelcome, unwanted attention which is created on the basis of you and that interferes with your work, then that will be termed as a sexual harassment. Act has gone further in terms of defining the sexual harassment, which is on the next slide. So this is what has been precisely defined under the act. Any unwelcome physical, verbal or non-verbal conduct of sexual nature, any demand or request for sexual favors, making sexually colored remarks, physical contacts or any advances, showing pornography or any other unwelcome conduct or of sexual nature. So again, many a times there is a confusion in terms of understanding what do you mean by sexually colored remark. So anything because of your sex, if you are becoming a victim of any kind of a taunts or any kind of gossiping, then that will be termed as it is related to the related to your sex. It's not sex based, but it is of a sexually colored remarks. It is related, it is having that sexual nature, and that's the reason it will be termed as a sexually colored remarks. Ma'am, move to next. Okay, now many a times whenever we used to handle complaints, many a times we observe that these respondents, they say that they never had any intention, and it just happened. They never had any intention. Rather, in the COVID period also, we handled one of the cases wherein it so happened that the person mistakenly he shared a video, a small clip on an official group wherein 12 people were there, their team members were there, some of them were ladies, and later on he realized that what he did, it was a mistake, and then he, of course, he deleted that particular message. But till the time people had downloaded and they had seen that particular video, which was obscene in nature. So you might not be having an intention, that kind of a intention, but what matters is the kind of the impact which is creating on other person. So those ladies literally got frightened. Some of them, out of those four ladies, two were the new joinees, and they felt that okay, this is how the organization culture is, and they felt that okay, this environment is not good for them to work in that particular organization. So one has to understand that it is irrespective of the kind of the intention or behavior. It is most important thing is what is that impact which is creating on that other person, on the victim. That needs to be taken into consideration. Okay, ma'am, move on to next. Okay, now these are the predominantly two types under which the sexual harassment has been defined: quid pro quo and the hostile work environment. So when we talk about the quid pro quo, obviously it's like give and take. So if you need say promotion, okay, so in return of that, give me something or some sort of sexual favors. So that will be fall under the category of quid pro quo. And when we talk about the hostile work environment, it is that environment wherein people are gossiping about, against you. People are gossiping about your character, about your looks, and that becomes that entire environment which is created in such a manner that it becomes uncomfortable for you to work in that environment. It starts impacting your performance, your work, and entire things will be termed as a hostile work environment. So even in this case, one thing one needs to understand and one needs to take into consideration is even the same gender person, even if a female is involved in such kind of a gossips, and she is passing such kind of a remarks or creating such hostile work environment, then definitely the aggrieved women, the complainant, she has right to file a complaint against that women as well. So every time it's not against the male, it could be against female as well if she is sexually harassing the complainant. Ma'am, move to next. Now these are the behavior which are generally observed, or when we talk about the organization, then these kind of behaviors would be falling under the category of sexual harassment. It could be leering, it could be say passing certain dirty jokes, sexual remarks about somebody's body, use of double meaning words, or any remarks on person's dress. how the person has dressed up. So that will also be termed as a kind of a sexual harassment. Next, ma'am. Now here I have put up some examples to understand what qualifies sexual harassment. So comments on dressing. So if somebody says that, okay, you look beautiful, or you look, your dress is nice, you look very good, then that is fine. That somebody will be taking it as a compliment. But if somebody goes ahead and if somebody says that, okay, you look very sexy, or hi babe and all that stuff, then definitely that it is on the person how the person is receiving that, and then that kind of a comment will definitely fall under the category of sexual harassment. Then the way I already mentioned, telling lies or spreading rumors about person's life or character, then definitely that kind of a gossip will again qualify to sexual harassment. And finally, poor ratings in appraisal. Again, so this is again open-ended. So if poor ratings have been given to you based on your consistent poor performance, then of course company will be having that kind of a records with them, and based on your evaluation of these poor ratings will be given to you. But poor ratings, if they have been given to you because you are not ready to give any kind of a sexual favors, or a person is creating that quid pro quo kind of a environment for you, then definitely that will be termed as the sexual harassment. Next. Okay, now this is I have taken from this website. This is not my original content, but these particular tips which they have given for harassment free online workplace, they were really good. So the first is, of course, you have to maintain a proper dress code. As per one of the complaints which we were handling, the complaint was that the person who was not wearing a shirt, and he sat for the meeting and he started his video, and that lady felt offended, and then she filed a complaint. So obviously it's not a good sign, it's not a good gesture. You have to follow dress code. If you are in a physical environment, then definitely you do follow dress code. So in a similar manner, be it online mode, you will have to follow proper dress code. Then you will have to make sure that you will be using a clean and plain background. There should not be any provocative displays or paintings in the background. I move to next. Now this picture I really liked, because it the way it says that your background tells, it reveals everything about you, and people becomes rather, this is a tendency, this is a human tendency that people become judgmental, and based on whatever things, how your bed has been set up, what kind of books you read, how your clothes have been placed over there, accordingly people will start making their own judgments about you. And that's the reason it is advisable that you should always go for the having a blur kind of a background, or you should use a proper image. Well, considering that if both the partners are working, then definitely everybody will not be getting a right place. But so even if you are attending any video calls or any meetings from your bedroom, then you will have to take care of your background. Moving to next. So this is about how professionally you are seated. Then one needs to be professionally seated when the video calls are going on. Even this is again one of the good etiquettes, we can say, that one has to seek permission, or at least inform the participants that, okay, the virtual meeting is being recorded. They will be taking the screenshots of whatever is presented on the screen on related to the projects and all. So this is also is expected. Moving to next. As in the current scenario, especially in IT companies where I'm associated with, we observe that people are working from different countries, working in the different time zones, and it's very essential that we have to respect the culture and value of people, because we are talking about the workforce diversity, and multiple people are working with the organization. So you have to take into consideration that part, and you have to respect their culture and values. Again, one has to avoid using inappropriate gestures, emojis, GIF in the chat, because all these things will be termed as a record. So even if you feel, or even if you delete it, it becomes easy to retrieve those things. So these will be recorded, and that's the reason one has to be very careful while using such kind of things in a chat. Moving to next. Again, while having a personal discussions one has to avoid asking any kind of a personal questions or the dirty jokes on this on the call or the chat. So one shouldn't feel offended if the person is looking at you, or kind of the elevator eyes with which person is looking at you. It becomes very discomfortable for a lady if she is attending a particular video call. So one needs to be very careful, and we always advise all our clients that if it is needed, they only ask people to start the video call. Otherwise, there is no need to get into that particular mode. Okay. Again, it is very important that one should avoid sending inappropriate videos, audios, and text messages, because by in a way indirectly you are creating the record which will act as evidence later where if the inquiry proceeding goes on. So one is not supposed to do all these things, and one is supposed to maintain their own clean image. And finally, avoid virtual stalking. So virtual stalking, if nowadays everybody is on Instagram, they are on all social medias, be it Twitter, Facebook. So don't follow the person everywhere, and don't see to it that what person is doing, and then based on that start asking questions to that person. So that will fall under the category of the virtual stalking. And stalking as per the IPC is offense. Move on to next. So these are the various acts wherein the protection has been already given. So when we talk about IPC, then section 354A, C, and D are already there. And if any person has been observed, has been found, then doing this particular acts, then definitely there is a punishment, imprisonment is there. So, and if you see section 354D, offense of stalking is also a punishable offense. It's a criminal offense. So same is applicable in case of a virtual environment as well. So virtual stalking should be avoided. And apart from IPC, of course, IT Act is also applicable. So section 67 of the IT Act, which is related to the transmitting of obscene material in the electronic format, is also applicable. So these are the protections which have been given apart from the POSH Act. Even for the protection of children, we do have POXO Act. Then related to the Transgender Act is also there. For the LGBT community also, if the LGBT community, if somebody declares their gender as women, and if they want to file a complaint, then of course company has to entertain that particular complaint. So these kind of protections have already been given under different acts. Move on to next, ma'am. Okay, now the obvious question is, who can file a case, who can file a complaint? So whether that person, that aggrieved woman needs to be an employee, or then only she can file a complaint, or even if she is just a visitor and then she can file a complaint, or even if the vendor or bystander or even an intern or a job seeker, who can file a complaint? So all of these which you are seeing on your screen, all of them, they do have a right, they do have a right to file a complaint. Reason being, they are filing a complaint against the respondent, and the respondent belongs to your organization. So even if the job seeker has come to your organization, she may not be the member of your organization, she may not get selected, but if she has come during that period and if she becomes the victim of sexual harassment, then definitely she has a right to file a complaint to the IC of that particular organization. And in a similar manner, it is applicable to all the people, be it a bystander, vendor, or the visitor, because the perpetrator who is involved in this harassment belongs to your organization, and that's the reason IC of that organization has right to enter. They have full right to entertain that such kind of a complaint. Moving to next, ma'am. Okay. Before we get into the IC, which is the authorized body or the authorized committee under the POSH Act, uh, I thought that I should first of all make you aware about this alternative which is available. So IC is there, of course, as per the POSH Act, and women can, aggrieved women, she can file a complaint over there. But at times it so happened that uh, say the boss or the managing person, the manager to whom that lady is reporting, he might be the representative, or he is a part of that IC, because in IC we say that there has to be a 50% women and 50% men, that kind of ratio should be mentioned. So if unfortunately, if that aggrieved women's project manager or the manager, if he is a part of the IC, then at that time she might not feel comfortable to go to IC and file a complaint, and then what is the alternative? So in that case, this Ministry of Women and Child Development, they have started with the She Box, which is an online complaint management system, wherein the lady can go and she can register her complaint. Ma'am, go to the next. I'll show them how the complaint looks like. So here one can go, the aggrieved woman can go and she can register her complaint. She needs to put up all her details, the organization details, of course, the person against whom she wants to file a complaint, and ultimately at the end she is supposed to mention, she is supposed to brief about that particular incident which had happened, and then she can register her complaint. Of course, through this ministry, this complaint will be routed to IC only. But only one thing is, this is a kind of a satisfaction to that aggrieved woman, that okay, she has filed it to the She Box. So ministry has taken a cognizance of that, and then they have routed it to the IC. So IC only will be taking care of that enquiry, and they will be completing the inquiry proceedings. Only thing is, there will be some monitoring mechanism, and that's the reason I see the committee members and the entire committee, without having any partiality, they will, in a given duration, they will complete this particular process of inquiry. Moving to next. Okay. So from redressal mechanism, the internal committee, I'll now hand it over to Dr. Peshwe.
Thanks, Shraddha. Thank you, OHR, for giving us this opportunity. And thank you, Sukriti, for the kind introduction. Let me begin with the second part of the presentation, in which I will be dealing with the redressal mechanism and the internal committee per se. We are going to have these headings under which we are going to talk about the internal committee, in which there are members, meetings, reports, registers, display boards, and the actual functioning. The members of the IC, the total members have to be at least 4. The composition of the IC, it has to be presided over by a senior woman employee. There have to be minimum 2 members from the employees, 1 member from the NGO, a law-based organization, or a lawyer per se, social work, and 1/2 of the members should be women. If you see the composition, it has to be a mixed bag, because everyone is going to get their own skills, and this is going to be very essential, because we have to analyze and then come at certain recommendations. So it is extremely important that we have people coming in from all sectors. Plus, we have males as well as females, because everyone is going to have their own contribution towards the case per se. Then the powers for the inquiry, it has the same powers as a civil court judge under the Code of Civil Procedure, which includes summoning and enforcing the attendance of any person and examining him on oath, collecting evidences based on documents, and any other matter which may be prescribed. Moving on, we have 2 reports which need to be checked out by the IC. The first is going to be the inquiry report, when the case comes and the entire proceedings are over, and then we have an inquiry report. The second report is an annual report. This is going to be a whole year, the calendar year, starting from 1st of January to 31st of December. So the number of complaints, the number of trainings, everything what happens in the entire year for that particular organization needs to be filed with the district officer. And just to remind you that 31st January, coming Monday, is going to be the last date for filing the annual report. We have to maintain 2 registers, a minutes of meeting and a complaint recording register. You have to have display boards where you have the mentions of the presiding officer, the secretary member, the NGO member with the contact details. Preferably, the board should be bilingual, English and in a local vernacular language. The mail ID is to be displayed. And in cases of virtual workplaces, you can have an online display in the ERP systems of the committee members with their details. Moving on to the actual functioning of the IC, it has 3 aspects. we have a prevention, prohibition, and a redressal aspect. So the prevention aspect is going to be orientation of the employees towards the act, awareness of what is amounting to sexual harassment, and sensitizing sessions for the employees to understand the nuances of the sexually colored remarks and other things related to sexual harassment. Prohibition will include the unwelcome behavior that constitutes workplace sexual harassment, and an emphasis needs to be placed on this, and vigilance needs to be placed about this prohibition. Coming to the redressal, who can complain, to whom, we have already seen. The contents of a complaint we will be seeing, and the sexual harassment complaint process as well. It is mandatory that a written complaint is done. The contents of a complaint will be involved or will include the description of each incident, relevant dates, timings, and locations, name of the respondent, and working relationship between the complainant and the respondent. The actual sexual harassment complaint process is going to involve two parts. First is the interviews with the complainant, the respondent, and the witnesses. And the second part is the post interviews, where the reasoning, finding, recommendations, and the actual report making will be involved. We have a checklist for the internal committee, which will involve all these points. Review the written complaints and response to the complaints. Review the applicable policy and act or rules, Vishaka guidelines, and any other relevant laws. We have to develop a plan. We have to meet the complainant. We have to meet the respondent, meet the witnesses, record statements, and have them dated and signed. It is very important that you have all the records in place with signatures. We have to review and adapt the plan as needed. Proceed with further interviews as needed, because as and how the case unfolds, new things come up, and then accordingly you can adapt and move on with the other plan. We have to analyze all facts to develop reasoning. That is the reason why you should be having analytical skills developed in the IC members. It is very important that you have capacity building trainings taken regularly for them, at least once a year, because the presiding officer and the other employees are taken up from the organization themselves. They may not be having the exact technical know-how for the POSH Act, and hence to orient them, as well as to have the proper principles of natural justice being utilized, this is extremely essential. So we have to analyze all the facts to develop reasoning. We arrive at the findings, give recommendations, we prepare the report, and we submit the file to the employer for implementations of the recommendations. It is to be noted that the IC itself cannot take any actions depending on the report. The report has to be filed to the employer. It is the employer who will be taking action on the recommendations. So what could be the different recommendations? They are disciplinary action, including a written apology, a reprimand, a warning, or a censure, withholding promotion, pay raise, increment. Worst cases, termination. You could also go in for counseling and community service for the respondent. There is a timeline for the redressal process. The filing of the written complaint by the aggrieved woman has to be done within 90 days from the last incident. The notice to the respondent has to go within 7 days. The conduction of the inquiry is within 90 days. Preparation of the inquiry report is within 10 days after completion of inquiry and sending it to the parties. Implementation by the employer on the recommendation is within 60 days. There are certain musts for the IC, which include confidentiality as the primary factor. It is extremely important that this is maintained. Otherwise, the Act prohibits the disclosure of contents of the complaint, identity and address of the complainant, respondent, and witnesses, information pertaining to conciliatory or inquiry proceedings or recommendations of the IC, action taken by the employer. If this is not followed, as per the service rules, rupees 5,000 is to be collected by the employer from the concerned from the concerned party of the internal committee. So that's all from my end, and we are open to take questions now.
Thank you, ma'am. Anybody from the audience, if they want to come forward and ask questions?
Stop share करायचं.
I have a question.
Yes.
If the incident happens outside the company and not during the office hours, so would that also be included in this?
Outside the company, for what reason?
The sexual harassment, I mean the sexual harassment, if that has happened after office hours, but not in the office, outside office, and the person is an employee of the both the parties are employees of a particular organization. So would the woman be allowed to give a formal complaint regarding the same, or does it necessarily have to happen during the office hours, in the office premises? Is there something like that required?
Shraddha, can you take this up?
Yeah. So basically, there is no such kind of a requirement. The way I told you earlier about the extended workplace. So house is an extended workplace. In a similar manner, if the sexual harassment takes place when the person is traveling, or if it is at the client's place, two colleagues are going to a client's place. So in that case, why they are associated with each other? Because the common thread between them is the organization for which they are working. So even if it happens beyond the organization, beyond working hours, then still it will be termed as a sexual harassment, and IC is supposed to take up that complaint.
Okay, thank you.
I'm also having one question, Rupali here. Can male employee also file this complaint if one use words for them or anything?
As far as male employees are concerned, of course, they cannot go to IC for filing a complaint, because IC has been constituted under the POSH Act only for the women. But if company is having a gender neutral policy, or rather most of the times what happens is most of the organization, they are having their grievance committees. So male employee, they can go over there and they can file their complaint. As far as IC is concerned, IC cannot handle this complaint because their boundaries are limited to only handling complaints coming from women.
Thank you.
Hello. Hello.
Yes.
Yeah, this is Rama. Actually, how many meetings should be conducted in a year? Either 4 or any 2?
No, quarterly meetings should be conducted every 3 months.
Every 3 months.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah,
Yeah.
welcome.
And what in the composition of IC, the woman has to serve the 2+ years services in company, or if even she joined 1 month, she can also be the presiding officer there?
Actually, this is a little dicey because the senior most is been mentioned. Specifically, it has not been mentioned about how many years in that particular company. So the seniority will be mattering more, and plus, in case there's no one else available, then maybe that person will have to be taken up as presiding officer.
Okay.
Thanks, Rupali. I think Prakash also had the same questions. What are the frequency of the meetings?
Yeah.
So there is also one more question from Sudhir. Is IC to be formed even if there are no women employees?
No, that won't be possible because the Act itself mentioned about the senior person, the presiding officer has to be a female person.
No, in that case, I'd like to add on one more thing. Even if assume a situation wherein the organization is having 10 or say 20 employees are there, all are male, then in that case, as the Act says that applicability is for more than 10 employees, then what they can do is, of course, they will have to form an IC, wherein they can ensure that 50% of the representation from both the genders. So external member could be a female, and as far as the presiding officer is concerned, if the same organization is having a parent body, or if they are having any other organization, that from that organization they can take up a senior lady as a presiding officer. And if it is not possible, assume a situation if it is a startup wherein all 20 are male and they don't have any say parent body or any other company or organization, in that case they can take help from the local complaints committee, and accordingly they can establish the IC.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Any more questions? Please unmute
Yeah,
yourself.
Rupali, this said, I'm having one question that whenever inquiry goes, it has to be in closed room under the camera and video recording. So is there any rule that inquiry shouldn't happen at workplace? It has to be outside in hotel or somewhere to maintain the confidentiality, or it can happen in office also if any.
Ideally, it should happen in an office, because hotel is not a right place, or we cannot call it as a professional environment. It should happen in the office, or otherwise virtual meetings would also be preferable. But ideally, it shouldn't go out of those office premises. When we are talking about the confidentiality, then why to go into the public places and discuss about all these things, right? So ideally, it should happen between the four walls of the organization.
Okay, yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Many questions are popping up in the chat box. So if I read out, there's one more from Prakash. Is there any criteria for participation? In brackets equal.
I believe Peshwe ma'am has already covered it. Is 50-50%. So 50% male, 50% female. That has to be the criteria for the constitution of IC.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. One from Sumant. Female visitor will file her complaint with the company where she is working or visited place.
Visited place.
Okay. Another one from Mangesh. Can female staff register a complaint against another female staff for harassment?
Provided that harassment is of a sexual nature, then only. Not a normal harassment. If it is a normal harassment, then definitely she can go to the grievance committee of the organization. As far as IC is concerned, IC will go ahead with the sexual harassment cases only.
Okay. Another from Sudhir. Is IC's report binding on the employer or implementation of or action taking?
Yes, of course. IC's report is binding. So when IC comes up with the recommendation, there could be 1-2 recommendation, whatever it is, and accordingly, whatever is the appropriate, what management feels, they are supposed to implement that.
Okay, thank you. From Sham, we have a question. Can a complaint be lodged by men employee against a women boss under POSH? Because the harassment can be from a
No,
lady employee also. A lot we are
not under the POSH, but the way I already mentioned, that if the male is a victim of sexual harassment, I know certain cases wherein it was proved that male were actually the victims of sexual harassment. But in that case, they had gone to the grievance committee. Probably what organization can also do is that they can go ahead with the same composition of the grievance committee, the way they are having for the IC, because IC members are already having experience of handling such kind of a cases. But exclusively IC has no right to entertain the case filed by the male employee related to sexual harassment. It should go to the grievance committee or any other redressal mechanism which company is having.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Sham. Yes, please.
Yeah, I'm having one question. If that female employee wants any police complaint or legal help, then it's IC duty to. Because in Mahindra Logistics, when I was giving training, our POSH committee document, that training document has mentioned the same in that.
See, if female along with filing a case with the related to sexual harassment with the IC, that option is always available to female, that she can file a FIR and she can lodge a police complaint. As far as IC is concerned, IC is supposed to continue with their inquiry proceeding, and they are supposed to come up with their recommendation. And as per the IPC, Indian Penal Code, police will also will do their separate inquiry, and whenever needed, it is the responsibility of the IC to support police with all the details, all the documents which they are expecting.
It's mandatory to IC to support police also in case.
Of course.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you, ma'am. We'll be taking in only a few more questions. Sorry for the time bound. I'll read some more from the chat box. Neha Sate has provided a statement that minimum 50% women should be there. That's right, ma'am?
Yes, 50% should be women.
Dr. Rishali asks, does POSH provide sex education as part of prevention measure, which can also be used as sensitization?
Sorry, I didn't get the question rightly. Can you please repeat it again?
Yes, sure. Dr. Rishali, would you like to unmute or I'll repeat the question?
Yes, thank you, Sukriti. My question is, with rising number of sexual violence and sexual um, misconduct at workplaces and around also, is POSH considering providing sex education to employees? Because you provide training of how to behave, how not to behave in terms of sexual behavior at the workplace. But if you provide training or of sex education, proper sex education I'm talking about, then it can help in reducing number of misconceptions among employees. And then
Yeah, so definitely. I mean, the way you are talking, if I understood it correctly, I believe you are talking about the gender sensitization, if I use the jargon correctly. So many organizations are there who are using this gender sensitization training as a mandatory training, and after completion of this training, they undergo the training of POSH.
so does it also include the basic concepts of sex education? Because if you know other gender, well, then things can be avoided. That is what my question is about.
Yeah, definitely. See, it is very essential to sensitize people in terms of the difference in terms of gender. Just to take an example, when we talk about our menstrual cycle, so it is very essential to make people understand that during that particular phase, that lady is undergoing say emotional imbalance, she is going through the physical pain. Rather, we had handled such kind of cases wherein during the menstrual period, employees became victim of certain kind of
Yes.
taunts. So that is not expected. So yes, that kind of a thing should be taken care under the gender
Yeah,
sensitization.
and one more question, if you can answer this. Sexual harassment at workplace is a trauma. Okay, the person who goes through it, male or female, they experience trauma. So do you also help them with some PTSD treatment like post-traumatic stress disorder? Uh,
Yeah, rather under the POSH Act as well, it has been mentioned the kind of the counseling. So psychological counseling is also one of the things which they have mentioned, not only to the victim but as well as the perpetrator, the respondent. So that kind of a trauma, so they will be in a position to face that trauma and cope up with the stress. So that kind of thing is also can be provided by the organization.
Thank you, Shraddha. Thank you so
Can I
much.
just add on to this, Shraddha? Whenever the complainant is coming with the complaint, she's already undergone a lot of trauma. So simultaneously, along with the proceedings of the IC, if counseling can be provided by the organization to the complainant would help a lot. And plus to the respondent as well, because even he will be undergoing a lot of trauma. There will be a lot of nuances which he may not have faced before, as you mentioned about the impact and not the intent. So sometimes even the respondent would be needing counseling and the organization could provide for that as well.
I'm having one question. If a complainant feels that this investigation is not going in proper direction and IC supporting the respondent, not the victim, so can that complainant withdraw their complaint in between, or it's mandatory to complete the proceeding and give the judgment?
See, complainant, of course, she has right to withdraw, and definitely then she can go ahead and she can file a case with, she can lodge a complaint with police.
But if IC says that they have to complete investigation, then it's mandatory for IC. As I am part of IC, it's mandatory for us to complete investigation.
Of course, see, the thing is, if when the complainant herself, if she withdraws her complaint, then as a proactive kind of the approach from the side of IC, of course IC can go ahead in terms of cross examination, we're checking the witnesses, and accordingly they can come up with the appropriate action. So at times we don't have any control in terms of how people think or their perception. So this could be a perception of that victim, that IC is not doing their job correctly. But if IC is genuinely doing is, and during the inquiry, if they found that yes, what victim was saying was right, and the complainant was actually the respondent was actually involved in that kind of a harassment, then definitely IC can recommend the action to the management. So as a proactive approach, definitely IC can go ahead and they can complete the proceeding.
But if complainant is not attending then it's kind of a ex parte judgment against respondent or what?
No, it will not be ex parte, because at times there are certain kind of a intimidating behaviors are also there. At times the complainant might be having some sort of trauma, or people term it as a stigma. Their reputation is at stake, and that's the reason they go through such kind of a situation wherein they withdraw the complaint. So after, if you see the complaint has been withdrawn, as such there is no onus on that complainant. But then IC needs to be very proactive, HR needs to be very strong, and they have to get into the root of that particular case, and accordingly they have to complete the investigation. I have handled certain cases wherein orally the complaints were given. The act says that has to be a written complaint. Oral complaint was given, but the complainant was not ready to come up with the written complaint. But we decided that okay, we'll go ahead, and as a proactive approach, HR decided to go ahead with the inquiry. So this could be possible. And again, whoever is the culprit in that particular situation, the culprit should be as per the service rules, as per the recommendations whichever are there, appropriate action should be taken against him.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you. There are many more questions in the chat box, but due to time bound
Yeah. Good
rule, we
evening.
cannot. Yes,
Sukriti,
sir.
though we have named this session as everything about POSH, but
But
due
we
to
could.
time limits, we cannot cover everything. So,
But sir,
yeah.
if some are asking if they can get a contact detail of such sessions can be done in industrial level. So if
Yeah, they can contact
yes,
us
maybe.
directly. I have already mentioned OHR contact number, and also Dr. Shraddha and Dr. Deeplaxmi also mentioned their number. They can directly contact them also, or they can contact OHR also. So definitely they will get help. And if they want to conduct a detailed session at their
Industrial level.
so that is also possible, no issue.
Yes, sir.
So I think Dr. Deeplakshmi, you already mentioned your contact numbers. And
Yes, sir.
this session will be available on YouTube also. So again, you can watch on YouTube also, and you can contact OHR for further plan of action. So now we are at the end of this session. I will
Yes, sir.
mention my thanks to Dr. Deeplakshmi and Dr. Shraddha, because they have very beautifully explained this concept right from introduction to many examples also they have quoted, and also they have taken cognizance of this COVID workplace and how POSH will applicable to COVID workplaces. That also they have mentioned. So thanks, Dr. Deeplakshmi, and thanks, Dr. Shraddha,
Thank you,
because
sir.
it was very short notice to you, because I
Yes.
contacted you on Wednesday, and within one day you agreed to have this session on Saturday. So this shows your passion towards your profession, both of you. So thanks once again.
Thank you,
And
sir.
just for audience, long back, 3 or 4 years back, also we have taken similar session when that this COVID was not there. So that time we have taken offline, and that time also Dr. Deeplakshmi and Dr. Shraddha, they came and they explained very beautifully about POSH. So once again, thanks. So, and thanks, Sukriti. As usual, you were fabulous for coordinating today's session. Everybody will agree that you have done a very good job. So thanks to you also. And last, thanks to all participants. Though today is Saturday weekend, many people they have joined. So thanks to all, and bye and happy weekend. And
Thank
care.
you.
Take care. Don't go outside without any emergency. Okay.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Details have
Thank
been
you,
given in
ma'am.
the box. Please do contact if any inquiries. Good night, everyone. Safe
Good
weekend.
Thank
night.
you.